Right about now, I would like to bring on somebody for you. Want to tell you that, ask you to help me make this introduction. I'd like to say a name, and I'd like you to repeat the name. And then when we get through, we'll all add it up, and it ought to have some fun for you. Are you ready? Let me say it first. You repeat it after me. John. Paul. Ringo. George, I give you the one and only fabulous Beatles!
And here we are with the president and founder of Liverpool Productions, actor, concert producer, promoter, visiting us today as an author once again. And from what I hear, he plays a pretty mean pinball, but maybe that's for another day. So happy to have back with us the author of the brand new, the book of top 10 Beatle lists, a friend to the show. Thankfully, I can say a friend to me, Charles Rosenay. Charles, welcome back.
I don't know what looks better, you or the book. They look so good together.
I'll tell you. Perfect together.
Perfect.
And well, speaking of perfect together, I may as well just throw in your first book here too.
Wow, I can see the similarities. Look at that.
Hey, look at this, man.
Who
Charles'
could have played
first book. And I think we spoke about this as well, but that's another one. Check out, everybody. But right now, this is the book where we're really, oh man, you and I were talking yesterday, and then before we started recording. This is so much more than a top 10 list book. And maybe we can start off first, Charles, by let me say that you having an open-ended approach to your contributors about their lists. If you can talk about that, I thought that was really, really, really brilliant.
Well, I thought that, the genesis of the book was, let me get people's top 10 favorite songs. And then, got a few. And then Elliot Easton of the Cars, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, huge Beatle fan. I think he contributed to the horror book too. Great guy. Says, hey, can I put in my favorite top 10 middle eights of Beatles songs? He goes, Charles, their bridges in their songs were unbelievable. And I go, yeah. I go, great idea. And I'm thinking, wait a second. I got to open this up to let the contributors, the actors, the athletes, the authors, let them come up with whatever top 10 lists they want. I'm not going to limit it to songs. I'm not going to limit it to albums. I'm not going to limit it to band or solo. And it made sense. It worked because it gave them more creative, the option to do what they wanted. And it made for a more interesting book. When you look at like Larry Kane, he toured with the Beatles. He was on their tours. He was with them in the U.S. concerts. It made sense for his top 10 list to be the top 10 most memorable concert shows he went to with them. So, yeah, thank you. I think that is a really great plus of the book. When you want to glean, I'm going to say minutia, or trivia, but things you may not have read before, anecdotes, stories about these things, that lent itself to it a lot more than just a top 10 list of songs, because in so many cases, Joey Mullen's memories of Bangladesh, Tommy Chong's, memories of the Beatles. Tommy Chong, of course, from Cheech and Chong, and those are just two or three that come to mind. We're talking about 64 of them, and each one of them deserved a place in the book. It's not like any of them were filler. In fact, so many others came in that I probably could have waited another year and made it 100, but 64. That magic number, right, Steve? 64, when the Beatles arrived in America.
Yeah.
And the song When I'm 64, it hit when I'm at 64. That's when I'm going to finish the book. That's when I'm going to get it to the printers. The manuscript it's all magical, was finished on February 9th of this year, the same day, of course, as the Beatles Ed Sullivan show. So
There is some
A
kind
lot
of
of good,
good karma in it. Yeah.
yeah, some
Yep.
kind of instant karma magic going on with this book. Yeah.
You know, you have some heavyweights bookending your list. You have the foreword by Julia Baird and the afterword by Bill Harry. Now, those are names that I'm sure many of our listeners have read or seen, but for those who might not be aware, could you tell us just how big they are in Beatles lore?
Well, so I wanted to do a balance. I wanted to do enough of the obscure, and there's not a lot of them because I think if you're a Beatle fan, you know every single name in there. But I wanted to do really ones where people would say, "Oh my God, how did you find that person?" or "Where did that one come from?" With the most well-known of, I would think, Beatle notables, you know, John Lennon's sister and Pete Best, you know, the Beatles drummer. But when it came to the forward and the afterword, this is interesting because John Lennon's sister, Julia Baird, gave me an amazing top 10 list for my horror book.
Oh,
She, you know, she did a thesis literally on the elements of horror in Shakespearean and literature, and it was like amazing. And I said, Julia, you know, I'm doing another book. I need a list from you. You know, your top 10 favorite Beatles songs, or you can do John Lennon says. She said, nah, I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, really? How could I put out a book without her in it? And I said, well, you know, I need a forward for the book. He said, I'll do that. So I'm glad that happened. Bill Harry, who I've known so many years, I think we only met once, but when I published Good Day Sunshine, the Beatles magazine, he used to contribute. He was my, you know, London editor, and he would contribute articles all the time, mostly called the Minnows of Mersey, where he would talk about Beatle related bands from Liverpool and the Mersey that people probably never heard of. That was, you know, his thing in Good Day Sunshine. Now that man has put out probably more Beatle books than any other human on the planet.
yeah.
And everyone, even the Beatles encyclopedia, that's Bill Harry.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I got to have something special from him. Well, not only did he give me a horror list in case I do a sequel to the first book, not only did he give me a great top 10 list, but he also gave me a forward for this book. And I'm thinking, wait, can't have two forwards. So I said, I'll have a forward and a backward, which I thought is, you know, Charles's sense of humor. But I don't want to offend anybody. So we'll do it the right way. John Lennon's sister Julia is the forward. Bill Harry's the afterword.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both, you know, what an honor to have both of them as, you know, like you said, right? The bookends for what I hope people will think is a fun, informative, and unique book.
You know, Charles, I think the reason why you have so many of these wonderful contacts and important contacts is, and I want the audience to know this, I've said this before, it's because you're just really a nice guy who's honest and fair. And I think anyone that you would ask would happily do anything for you. And I appreciate you over the years helping me out with guests. I think that's pretty much,
thank you. That means a lot.
That's pretty much how you wrote it, right, Charles, for me to say? No.
I got to Steve, thank you. And you know what? That's more important. It's more important than anything else, you know, that people, you know, like what I do. It's nice being liked, you know, that's a nice side thing to it. But everything I've done through the years, whether it was conventions or publishing magazines or all the tours to Liverpool, they bring people such joy, and that brings me joy. Yeah. And now, you know, in this second act, in this third act, fourth act, whatever, this other feather in my cap that I've, you know, put on this new hat of publishing books, I'm loving it because the feedback I get is great. And the people are saying this fills, you know, a niche they wouldn't have thought. I wouldn't have thought. You know, I never expected to do a Beatles book.
Sure.
I said everything has been written. What could I possibly add? You know, maybe interviews with people who've been at my conventions. Yeah, I guess. But this really was the right follow-up to the horror book. It was the right time for me to put out a Beatle book. And fortunately, there were enough of these celebrities who like me that I was able to, you know, coerce them into giving me lists.
Yeah, you know, Before I have my next question, well, you segued perfectly, but you mentioned the celebrities. Why don't you give us a cross section of just talk about an eclectic group of Beatles fans?
My gosh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we talk about the names that a general fan might know, or a general, just someone who loves celebrities and loves pop culture and doesn't even have to be a diehard Beatles fan, right? And you got Dick Cavett, who is, one of the greatest television interviewers of all time, almost on the level of Steve Ludwig with interviewing. He was, almost. He interviewed Harris and he interviewed John and Yoko, but every person of the time. And I'm just honored to get a list from him. But then actors and actresses. We got Lisa Wenchel from what was she? What show was she? Facts of Life.
Yeah.
And how did I get her? That's interesting because there's tie-ins with how you get certain people. She hosts a show on the Me TV network called Collector's Call, and the producers called me and said, "Hey, we're doing a monkeys segment on a gal who has one of the largest monkeys collections in the world. It happens to be in Connecticut. She has her own monkeys museum. Can you come in and be the authority? Can you be the collector's expert?" Can I be? Of course. So I came in, was the go-to expert on the show, and I said, "Lisa, I need a top 10 list for you." "For what?" "Beatles." "Okay, you got it." Well, that really was a nice accompaniment to Mackenzie Phillips, actress from One Day at a Time, Dinah Manoff from Grease and Soap. So for the people who aren't diehard Beatle fans but are saying, "Well, why would I be interested in this book?" Because it's celebrities, it's pop culture, it's actors, it's actresses, it's TV people, it's DJs. We got Cousin Brucey with a list.
We've got
Dave
Winfield.
What's that?
We've got Dave Winfield.
Dave Winfield. I talk about all the, the Rock and Roll Hall of Famers that are in here, and I'm proud of those. But we got a baseball Hall of Famer with a great list. I mean, he really...
I don't know why I should be surprised, because he's obviously a smart man through all of his careers and dealings, but he is a Beatle fan. He really took it to heart.
He did. And there's a great picture of him with McCartney. And I kind of took liberties with the photos, because in many cases I had shots of them, of the celebrities, at their peak, shots of them on stage. But I tried to go with, to make the book a little more personal, if I have pictures with the celebrities, I try to put those in myself. And I did that at the risk of being, I didn't want it to come off egotistical, but I wanted it to come off that, hey, I'm honored that I was able to meet so many of these people, have pictures with them. And I think I even wrote in my introduction, someday I'm not going to be on this planet, and my kids are going to take out the book and they're going to say, "Oh, how did my dad get Ringo's producer, Mark Hudson, to give a list?" They'll see a picture with me, with him. They'll figure, all right, so he hung out with him and got it. And that was Mackenzie Phillips was another one of those scenarios. Mac, how she likes to be called.
Right.
I had to pull out one line from her list, because her list was shorter. And in all what she wrote that she slept with Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And had the Enquirer still been around, they would have probably picked up on that line. Well, it turned out she was a kid. She was in a hammock. Paul McCartney was in the hammock. She snuggled up to him and fell asleep as a kid. She slept with him. So, I give away one of the great lines.
Yep.
But what I did is I culled some of those great lines and put them on the back cover, because some of those really, really stood out. But, this is a who's who. It's Tommy James. It's two of the Quarrymen. It's four different people associated with Badfinger and the Ivies.
Yes.
Sister Sledge, Kim Sledge from Sister Sledge, Daryl McDaniel from Run DMC. These are besides the diehard, Beatle people. And for me, the real diehard Beatle person, if you were around in the day, and you collected every Beatles album, you would have probably had a VJ album called either Jolly Watt
Yeah.
or the Beatles versus Frank Ifield.
Mm-hmm.
Frank Ifield. Who would have thought? Where is this guy? You know, that was my real score. That was my real coup. I've been trying to get in touch with him for decades to come to a convention or somehow reach him, and I never was able to. Finally got through, got a list from him, and it's great. It's one of the highlight lists in the book.
And I'd love to make this point now, Charles, that okay, the selling point obviously is that it's a top 10 list, top 10 Beatle list.
Yes.
It's almost as if that top 10 list is peripheral because there is so much information. And I'm a first generation Beatles fan. I learned things in every single chapter. And I think that is where the hidden treasure in this book is, that so many cool things like the Mackenzie Phillips story, and just that is what everyone should be looking for in this book. You can't believe the amount of info that Charles has included in this book.
Thanks so much for pointing that out, because I don't think that's something I could get across in a blurb, in an ad, in a Facebook post. But thank you for bringing that out, because after I published the book, when it's so close to you, it's lists. It's just gathering and editing and finding the photo to go with it and making sure the grammar is correct and writing a bio for it. And it wasn't until after I got it back, wow, there's a lot of great information.
Oh my goodness.
And as a Beatle fan, I liked reading it after the fact and reading it beyond the list. And thank you. I agree with that. And that means a lot that you picked up on that. Thank you so much.
Sure. And it's to be Charles, it's like a mini course in Beatles history, this book. And I'm exaggerating that every single chapter I learned something.
Thank you so much. And the ones that, I wish others made it into the book. They came in too late. But the ones that are in there, I go through the book and I think, wow, who would I have pulled out? And I can't come up with any, because whether they're the smallest connection to the Beatles, whether they're part of rock and roll history, whether they're an athlete or an author, I think everyone really deserved their spot in the book.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I have a little list here, and I want to be sure that I don't give any spoilers away. I'll leave whatever you want to, add on to my little list here. But like you said, 64 contributors, they all belonged. There are a few that I pointed out. Can I run them down the list for you, and you can say whatever you like about them? All right, now.
Yeah, please.
About what John Lennon asked Cousin Brucey at the 1965 Shea Stadium concert in the dugout. I had never, ever heard that. And I don't know if you want to expand on it, or if people buy the book and find out, whatever.
I don't want to give too much away, but what interests me is I looked back on, Cousin Brucey interviews, and he's been a guest, at my Beatle conventions. And he always tells the story about the medallion, the St. Michael's or St. Vincent's, something that Ringo lost, and then he went on the air. And that story we've heard infinitum. We've always heard that forever. And I didn't remember hearing the story about what, him and John Lennon's back and forth at Shea in the dugout. Let's not give it away completely. Definitely. But you're right. I didn't know that prior to my own book. Mm-hmm. And I think I know everything when it comes to this stuff.
When you read this, everybody, this is what we're talking about. It's worth the price of the book alone, because it's something that, like I said, as a first generation fan, I had never heard this story, and it's amazing what John does with
and I toyed with putting that as I mentioned, I put a few quotes on the back of the book. Mm-hmm. And I toyed with putting that on, but I thought, well, I don't want to give that away. If I could have done it as a teaser, I would have. But yeah, it's more fun to read it in the context of Cousin Brucey's list.
Yeah, definitely good thinking, Charles. Brute Force, the King of Pho, the Pho King. I think he's hilarious, but I loved a phone call he got from John and George, and I'll leave that with you.
Yeah. So that's another great example. You know, would we have ever heard of this guy, Stephen Friedland? Would we have heard of Brute Force had he not been signed to, Apple Records? Well, maybe, because he was one of the tokens. He's written stuff, and he's a New York musician. The fact that John and George fell in love with this one song, maybe they would have fallen in love with "They're Coming to Take Me Away," haha, and signed Jerry Samuel as, Napoleon IV. Maybe they would have signed something else. But this was so, let's do something beyond. But, for him to get a call and describe the call in the book, again, I'm not going to give a lot away, but that's part of his list. Now, mind you, this guy's brilliant. He's a good writer. He's an intellect, and he's a classy, funny guy. He contributed to the book of top 10 horror lists.
Yes.
Back when I never thought, I'm never going to do a Beatle list, so that'll be the end of it. Subsequent to the horror list book, he came to one of my Fab Four music festivals.
Yeah.
He performed a set, played the King of Fa, and the crowd was King loving it. You gotta have fun with the title. Yep. And yeah, of course, he didn't tell the story on the stage, but he tells it in the book, and it's a great addition.
And I will not give anything away, but there's another instance where, besides the list, it really gives a nice glimpse about John and George too. Something it's just so many beautiful little nuggets in here.
Yeah. Well, for a fan like yourself and myself, is going back to the 70s when bootlegs came out, if there was 15 songs that we had, but one snippet that we didn't have before, my gosh, wasn't that album worth it for that one snippet of them goofing on a teddy boy or whatever the song was at the time? And so when I get, an article, or when I see a book, or when I see a film, and it gives us that information, it's like, wait, should I have known that before? How did I not know that before? And I think there's a lot of those wow kind of moments in the book. And yep. Again, thank you for pointing those out, because that's again something you can't advertise. What am I going to put? Oh, look out for the wow moments you might not have expected. You read it, you enjoy it, and if those moments come out and the fans, get those out of it, that added another level and another texture of
so many. Besides Haley Mills, my biggest crush was Peggy Lipton. She's in the book.
But not with a list.
No, but
she doesn't have. We don't want to mislead anyone to think that Peggy Lipton gave me a list, although it would have been really mod if she did. No, but she's in Bill Harry's list of the gals that got away. What a brilliant list. I mean, talk about thinking outside the box. He could have done the 10 other Mersey bands that were, that were the Beatles competitors or on the Beatles level at the Cavern. He could have done the 10 venues that the Beatles played besides the Cavern that were exciting. He could have come up with so many lists. He said, well, no, I'm going to do one on the 10 gals who the Beatles loved or loved the Beatles that didn't necessarily wind up being a Mrs. Beatle, right?
Brilliant idea.
And one of them, I think I brought this up. Did I bring this up in another interview? Yeah. One of them, Bernie Burns, is who I'm talking about.
Twist and Shout?
Well, no, not Bernie, who wrote Twist and Shout.
Okay.
Bernie's she's a female. She's married, Byrne. She's married to Mike Burns. The two of them opened Liverpool Story in Liverpool, which is one of the biggest tourist attractions in the world. They wrote a book about it, as you know, called the story behind the Beatles story. Now, she dated George.
Yeah.
She was at the cavern all the time. There's a famous picture of the Beatles on stage, and she's sitting in the crowd with her hands folded. I put the picture in the book. She
Yep.
gave me her list. Her husband he was a Mersey musician, played in all the clubs with the Beatles and all that. He gave me his list. He gave me 5. She gave me 5. We got a top 10 out of them. But she was also one of the top 10s of Bill Harry. So that one ties together magnificently.
Absolutely. Liberty DeVito gave his favorite album. I won't even give that away if you don't want to. It's one that I haven't heard often. Great album, but not as someone's favorite. All these little surprises that come up in the book.
Yeah, let me look him up, because that's not something is a problem to give away. You know,
I
I
can
think
tell you,
after
if you like.
Yeah, I have a lot of D's in there. Oh, here it is. Favorite album. Oh, yes, because you mentioned that to me in our pre-notes. Beatles for Sale. You wouldn't think an American would pop Beatles for Sale as a favorite album.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, give yourself a tap on the shoulder, Mr. Billy Joel's drummer comes up with an import as a Beatles favorite album. Good call. Very impressive. Right. Yes.
Yeah. And you know, when I looked through over the track list, yeah, this is a great album, but you can say that just about any track list of a Beatle album.
And I like what he did. Because he didn't just do, top 10. You mentioned the Beatle album, but he did his favorite Beatle album, favorite solo songs, favorite TV appearance, greatest moment in my life, that kind of thing. And I liked a lot of the people did that greatest moment thing, because they had Beatle connections. They had their close encounters with the Beatle.
Mm-hmm.
And just like fans like yourself or myself, some of us have met Beatles. Some of them wish we could. But to hear a celebrity talk about meeting a Beatle and then bringing them, they're back. They're on our level now. They're not, they're not the superstar who drummed behind Billy Joel. They're not Darryl McDaniel, who is the Run DMC. I mean, he puts at the end, his dream is to collaborate with Ringo.
Yes.
That's his dream. He writes,
Ringo, if you read this, Ringo, get back to me.
Call me. Let me. So it's great when the celebs, are as big as fans as we are.
Yeah. A couple more that I have down that I want to give you, your thing. But you mentioned earlier Dick Cavett. I could listen to him speak or read what he writes forever.
Forever.
And he doesn't let down in this book either.
But he gives a tease at the end. It was like watching a Marvel movie with with those multiple credits at the end, because he writes, these are the stories I can tell. I'm like, what? Give me the ones you can tell. I'll do a book on that.
Yeah, he better have them written down somewhere.
Yeah, he's brilliant, and his list is brilliant. And we talk about what an honor it was. He's the cream of the crop. To get a list from him was, just as high as I can get for the celebrities. He was very special, and I loved having him in the book.
You mentioned Tommy Chong.
Yeah,
Tom. I'd like to bring this up, Charles. I am a real consumer of the cruise chews, the Cheech and Chong's Chews cruise, the gummies. I'm running low here, but I have plenty more. Plenty more on the drawer here. But you mentioned Tommy Chong, and everybody thinks, I'm sure, rightfully so, doper. Okay, next guy. But again, he's got some deep things to say in your book.
Tommy was interesting. It's interesting. Now, from someone who's never been a stoner, someone who's never had a gummy in my life, talking to Tommy is just another level of wow, because he's brilliant too. And he has amazing theories, and he has amazing concepts. And with him, he was one of the few, him, Mark Hudson, Joey Mullen, who didn't, I don't know if they're not disciplined, they didn't want it to be homework, they would not sit down, email a list, write out a list. They wanted to talk. They wanted to tell their stories, and then I would, of course, transpose them or transcribe them. And then a gal, Jackie Starr, was nice enough to, after I edited and talked, that she would write it out for me. And Janet Davis, I want to give credit for editing my book, and Shannon for doing the artwork, who I think you're going to mention anyway. But Tommy, yeah, his was a full interview. We did a complete Zoom. What a great guy. He gave me a Zoom for a sequel to the horror list, if I ever do that, and the Beatles list. And as he's talking, it's like us, because there's a smile in his voice, there's a reverence, and there's a love. I mean, he loved Harrison. He loved that. You can hear it in his voice. So I don't know if that comes across when we transcribe some of the stories they told. I know it didn't for Mark Hudson, and I wish it came through even more, because if you're reading a couple of pages of Mark Hudson's, his would have gone 50 pages. His stories were so long and so well told and so colorful, as is the man himself. And the same with Joey Molland. Yeah, come on. I mean, these guys, just every one of them, just I love them. I love them for being part of the Beatles world, for being part of the entertainment world, for all the joy that Cheech and Chong gave us. But I love these guys because they were just nice enough to say, yeah, I'll give you an hour of my day. I'll give you 2 days to work on a list. Some of them took months to do it, but they all did such a great job.
I cut you off when you were saying Joey Molland. He just seems like such a great guy.
Joey's one of my favorite people in show business and outside of show business. It's just, if you hear it now, we'd be hugging. Down to earth, so kind, so generous, and just, everything I've ever done, whether it was come to a convention, whether it was, hey, Joey, I need to get you on a podcast, do this. He's when, where, how, and we jump to do it. And with him, it was a case of getting on the phone and doing the interview. And we're talking and talking. I'm waiting, and at the end of the interview, I'm like, wait, did I ask him? Did I ask 10 different things that would constitute a list? I did that with one other person in person. I haven't told this story, so I'm going to share it with you. The only other person who knows about this is my friend Jeffrey Smith from Texas, who's now in Louisiana, who's come on some of my Beatle tours. So I'm doing a shout out to him because him and I were on a ghost tour to New Orleans. We're checking into the hotel. I'm going to share an amazing story with you. And we're at the front desk, and he's wearing a Beatle t-shirt on the ghost tour. I'm wearing a Monkees or a Beatles t-shirt. And the girl behind the desk she's oblivious. She has no idea. And so we're poking fun of her. Well, you never heard of Stevie Wonder? Who? I go, he sang with Paul McCartney. Oh, you ever heard Michael Jackson? He sang with Paul. She heard of Michael Jackson. She goes, I know. I'll tell you someone I know who you don't know. And I go, who? She goes, Frogman. And I stop and I look at Jeffrey and I go, no, can't be. I go, do you mean Clarence Frogman Henry? She goes, you know him? And I go, yeah. She goes, he's my neighbor.
What?
I go, really? Where do you live? She goes, I live at 40. She gives me her address. I go, oh, wow. And you're telling me he lives next door. You can't miss it. His whole yard is decorated by frogs. Steve, what do? I leave that hotel. I jump in the rental car. I drive to the place. I see this house. You couldn't see more frogs decorating. Big frogs, little frog, pop. It's decorated with frogs. This is Frogman's house. I'm praying he's alive and well. I knock on the door. A woman comes and goes, he goes, let them in. We come in his house. There's not only frogs, there is a whole museum in his den with pictures of him with every oh my God, politician, presidents, dignitaries, pictures of him with the Beatles. Right. I sit down and he goes, you want some water? He goes, you want some autographs, guys? Well, yeah. Now in my car, I had a gift from my friend Chris Antonucci, who lives in New Orleans, gave me a poster of the Beatles when Frogman opened for them and a shirt. I ran out, had him sign that. And as we're sitting there, I'm thinking, I'm going to start recording. And I start asking, Clarence, who was your favorite Beatle? Oh, Paul McCartney. Well, why do you say that? Well, we played cards together on the tour. Oh, so that's why. And as I'm talking to him, I'm thinking in the back of my brain, I'm coming up with a top 10 list. I am getting a top 10 list from this R&B legend, this soul singer who, I mean, he's a legend in the world, but in New Orleans, he's a god. And what kismet, what bashert, how can you can't make this up. To have been in New Orleans, to have been there on a ghost tour, to have been there with my buddy who was a Beatles fan, to go to his house because the girl behind the desk, we were teasing back and forth, she was his neighbor, and he's one of the lists that I'm like, wow. And the illustrations that we put with his are really great. It's a picture of me with him, but also shots of him with the Beatles in the book really made that. Yeah, wow, right?
So, it's good to know the Frogman didn't croak.
Loser!
Wow.
He said
Oh my God.
He said very disrespectfully, forgive me, Clarence. I'm sorry.
There's his obituary. My God, that's when he passes, and it should be a long time from now.
Yes.
He's not the healthiest guy, but he should be with us for a very long time. That's it. That's Frogman croaks. That's the obituary
I
byline.
apologize for that joke, but I couldn't let go. So I'll go to hell.
Good one.
A couple more quick ones, and then I want to turn it over to you. I've seen this name written a million times, but I've never actually heard it said. Is it Ivor Davis or Ivor?
Ivor Davis. Ivor Davis.
Yeah. Don't want to give it away again, but another really wonderful moment in the book.
Ivor's a great guy, and I've only gotten to know him over the past few years. I never realized that he was part of the Beatles' inner circle, like Larry Kane, who was the American who toured on all the U.S. concert tours early on. Ivor Davis was there too, and he was their friend, and he was their confidant. I think he tells an interesting story of being with the Beatles and Elvis. I mean, how many people were there? The four of them,
right.
Mal and Ivor. So having his list in the book is really special. And we'll do a shout out to people like him and Leslie Cavendish, the Beatles hairdresser, because they're in my book, but they've also got their books. They also have Beatle books, which are great too. And, you don't talk about just authors, but Bill King. I pride myself on putting out Good Day Sunshine for almost 2 decades. Beatle Fan has been the #1 Beatles magazine for 100 years? It's forever. It comes out every other month without missing a beat. It's the definitive, magazine for Beatle fans. And we got a list from Bill King, which I'm really proud of too.
Yes, I was so happy to see that as well. Real fast, and I'm going to turn it back to you in a second. Angie McCartney. That's all I'll say, and I'll see how far you want to go with that. But her list is in the book.
We got a Lennon with John Lennon's sister, right? We got 2 McCartneys, Angie and Ruth. We don't have any stars except all the STARSs that are in the book. And we came close, but unfortunately Louise passed. We were working on getting a list from Louise Harrison. But Angie McCartney, who of course married Paul's dad, Jim, and Ruth McCartney, Paul's stepsister, both gave us lists. And we got to do a shout out to them because God bless them. Angie's in her 90s and she's still rock and rolling. She has a tea company, she sells teas. Ruth has an internet company. They're really out there and they're on the air with their own podcast. The two of them team up and do a great podcast. So whereas in my horror book list, I got just Angie's list, which was a great horror list. And who would have ever thought, that Paul's stepmom would give me a list for the horror book? It was a natural. They didn't even hesitate. They were one of the first ones I asked, and they both came through with flying colors. and both their lists are amazing.
And this is, again, a story I had never heard about, a Beatles song that I've known forever, obviously, a new story. I never knew.
Let's just say that we know how Paul McCartney changed a certain song from his Scrambled Eggs Dream into Yesterday.
Mhm.
We know that it came to him in the Peter Asher, Jane Asher home.
Mhm.
But there's one element to the story that isn't as well known, which Angie reveals in this book of top 10 Beatle lists,
Yes.
which we'll leave at that, because that is a great teaser.
Oh my good! And I have never heard that story, that part of the story.
I didn't either. I don't know. Mark Lewison, did you know that? Bill Harry, did you know that?
Yeah, right.
Paul, do you remember that? Yeah, really amazing.
You know, Charles, I want to just deviate just a little bit. One of your chapters is called Back to the Egg in your book. Spin It On, rather. Good.
Yeah, Spin It On.
Well, Spin It On, the chapter Spin It On. And that is my favorite song from Back to the Egg. Being you are such a Beatle maniac. Isn't that one of the great underrated Paul albums, Back to the Egg? Or am I just
gosh? No, I love Back to the Egg, and I think the only reason that band didn't continue and us get more albums of that ilk was, of course, because of Paul's bust in Japan, and that pretty much put an end to that version of Wings. But look at the talent that was in there. Steve Holley, one of the best drummers of all time, and Lawrence Juber, a virtuoso guitarist. And he's another one of those sweethearts who, Lawrence, you got it. What do you want? You got it. He's just amazing. And it was real great to get Ringo's current drummer, Greg Bissonette in the book, Paul, Lawrence Juber in the book. But I'm so glad you mentioned Spin It On, because when it came out, it sounded like an album of the time. That was kind of new wave-ish, kind of power pop. And, it's one of those, it's not forgotten by Beatle fans and McCartney fans, but it's fallen through the creases, I think, when you think about, the great McCartney albums. It should be up there with all of them. And I had to call the chapter Spin It On because it's one of my favorite songs from that album. And we got to say hello, even though we didn't get me a list in time for the book, Denny Lane was a big part of that Wings, era.
Mm-hmm. I saw Denny. I was going to say real quickly, I saw Denny Lane at my father's place in Long Island. He did the whole Band on the Run album, as well as.
Your dad booked him there, yeah?
No. The name of the place is my father's.
I know. I was getting you back for Frogman.
Loser.
However, my dad is no longer with us, unlike Frogman.
Right.
Yeah. Good one, Charles. See? Wow. Right over my head. Sorry. That's
right over the Beatles. Right over the Beatles.
Right over. Good one. But did anybody surprise you with anything they said without even being specific? I'm sure you must have been, like we've been saying in the conversation. Some things must have really said, "Wow."
So I was just so surprised to get lists from some of the people. Leo Sayer, who I was a big fan of, and that's one of these great pop singers, writers who where is this guy? And he gave me such a great list. Another one on that level is Walter Egan, Magnet and Steel. And if you're a pop culture person, if you're a celebrity person, if you know your shtick from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and you love, the pop culture, you're going to know every name in the book. You're going to love. And there was one group I got a group list from a band who were one-hit wonders. And I always would think, wait, is that song The Supremes? Is it Martha Reeves and the Vandellas? It's a song called Nothing But Heartache by the Flirtations. The Flirtations are in England. They're in England. They gave me a list. That was a surprise for me. And it was one of those roundabout things where I asked someone for a list, couldn't get the list. And he says, well, I kind of work with the Flirtations. Did you ever hear of them? I go, yeah, I
Mhm.
love that song. I'll get you their list. So we got their list as a band list, and that pleased me. That surprised me. Frank Ifield still sticks out as the biggest
That's
surprise. Um, I got, I haven't told anybody this, but I got a lot of rejection letters, only because mostly people are too busy. Some cases were, I don't think I know enough Beatles songs to write a list, which I think is a cop out. And some people, just they felt it was homework. I get it. During the pandemic, it would have been a lot easier to get all these people sitting home doing nothing to give me lists. Now they're touring, they're appearing at conventions, they're appearing in films. It's harder to corral, people who are, of that level to give lists. But I got the sweetest rejection notice from somebody who is, my brain is woo, and my kids' mouths dropped when I got one from Lin-Manuel Miranda, the king of
Wow.
Broadway,
Yes. Wow.
Hamilton.
Hamilton.
And
Sure.
he sent me an autograph, a personalized,
Wow.
letter, and he apologized. He said, I'm just too busy, and I apologize for not being able to do this list for you. I was tempted to do, a couple of pages of chapters of letters like that from people who couldn't do lists, to
Hmm.
show, whoa, look how nice these people are. I remember when I asked Peter Tork, he should rest in peace, for a horror list. He goes, Charles, I'll do anything for you, but I haven't seen more than probably 2 horror movies in my life. And I would love to do the list, but I can't, So in my brain and in my folder somewhere, I have all the nice, people who would have loved to have done lists, but just, couldn't do it. Another one was Barry Bostwick, from
Wow. Very
Rocky
cool.
Horror
Yeah,
Picture
sure.
Show, Brad
Hmm.
Majors. Those are just a few that come to mind out of the so many people.
And
And
I hear another book coming up, Charles. This is the perfect book of
that's it. The
letters I received or something like that.
the rejection letters I received. Yeah, but most of them don't respond. If I've sent out 500 requests for top 10 lists, I got 70, 80 back. Used 64 of them in the book.
Hmm.
Of maybe 50 to 100 wrote back apologizing and not giving me a list.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's so many, Steve, you wouldn't believe how many there are, that if I kept nudging them and nudging them, they would still come through. It's at some point you have to finish a book,
Yeah,
or
right.
else it's
Yeah, yeah.
it's it's an unfinished project and it can go on forever. But maybe there'll be a sequel. Maybe there will be the bride of the book of top 10 horror lists,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
maybe there'll be the sequel to the book of top 10 Beatle lists someday. But
Mhm.
even if there isn't, I'm just so happy with the people who contributed, and the response I've been getting, and the feedback and the reviews, and the people like Butch Patrick couldn't wait to tell the world,
Talk about a
and
great
I
book.
write it in for it because I like revealing, the people one day at a time. I want to reveal each day on Facebook a new person who's in the book for those who haven't gotten the book yet. And Butch couldn't wait to, when he saw that I did the reveal of the book and then I finally got it. He said, "Yeah," he wrote in the notes, "I'm so happy to be one of your top 10 lists." Oh, Butch, you gave it away. um, and I know that friends like Ron Dante from the Archies, and Terry Sylvester from
Alex,
from the Hollies,
and
and Jeremy Clyde, whose birthday today, while we record this, is Jeremy Clyde's birthday. All those people, I know they're chomping at the bit to be able to announce that they're in the book.
Mhm.
But the only people who will know who's completely in the book are the people who get the book, the
And
people who listen to your show, pretty
Mhm.
much. That's it.
Right.
Because if you're on Facebook and you're a friend of mine, I'm trying to do one a day, one every other day, that kind of thing.
Now the usual suspects, you can go to the usual places to get the book. Is there any one particular that you recommend? What place to get it? Or
A great place to get it, and I hope this is airing before then, is at the Chiller Theater Expo
Oh, yes.
April 28th, 29th, and 30th. I'll be there.
You're there, my friend.
I'll be there signing. Yes, I know you'll be there. We'll see each other, and you'll bring your book so I can sign it. There'll be I'll be there with all my books. I'll be there to sign books, and I'll be there with a special guest. This is the first time in history that I'm bringing along a celebrity who will be there to sign, and that's Melanie, the great singer who was at Woodstock, who's got a chapter in this book.
The legendary.
And is one of the guests. Legendary, yeah. She'll be at Chiller. I hope she brings her roller skates, her brand new key. I hope she brings candles. I hope all those things we can get signed. But that's a great place where I'll be signing autographs. I'll be signing them in Liverpool during Beatle Week, and we have a sold-out busload of 50 people coming with me to London and Liverpool. We're going inside Abbey Road Studios. It's very exciting for my 40th anniversary of bringing fans there. But I guess what you're alluding to is, how can your general person who's not going to these events get a book? The simplest way, Amazon. $19.99. You just send it away. They get it to you in a day or two. I don't know how they do it. If you're a Prime member, you don't even pay postage. If you want a signed copy, you can get it directly from me. Just email Book of Top 10 Beatles Lists at gmail.com. And it's Book of Top 10 with the number 10, not TEN. And it's Beatles Lists, plural. Or go to the website, which is www.bookoftop10beatleslists.com.
Right,
and I think there's a link, or it gives a phone number, and it gives the emails, all those ways. But message me on Facebook. You want this book. You're going to love the book.
And this is not a cliche, Charles. I don't mean to sound this like a cliche, but you do not have to be a Beatles fan. I can't imagine there are any like that, but to really love this book. Like you said, it's more of a pop culture thing.
Thank you. I said that about the horror book. I said it's a pop culture celebrity book, and you don't have to be a horror person to like it. And my friends and relatives who got it said you were right about that. But I get it. No one's going to pick up the Book of Top 10 Horror Lists and get it because Ruth Buzzy is in it, or because Pete Best gave me a horror list. Same with the Beatles book. If you're a celebrity, if you're a Beatle, if you love celebrity, if you love pop culture, you're gonna love it. That's the plus of it.
Yep.
But the person who's really gonna eat it up is a Beatles fan, for all the reasons you gave, the tidbits of information, the trivia that we didn't know about, the magical stories that are told. It works on both those levels, but it mostly works for Beatle fans, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. But you'll be pleasantly surprised either way, everybody. And again, don't think it's just a top 10 list book. It is hugely more than that. You are always on the go, always busy. I know this book is, we're talking about the book, and that's taking up much of your time. What about down the road? You have anything on the back burner?
Yeah, always. One book is completed and is at a publisher. So when we do the big reveal, I'll come on and tell you it is a music book and has nothing to do with the Beatles. I got that coming out hopefully within the year, co-authored by Mark Arnold, who puts out a lot of great pop culture books. We've got the Beatles tour that we do every summer. But if you want to come with me to London and Liverpool, wait till 2024, because this year is sold out. The hotels in Liverpool are sold out. My group is packed. But fans can go to www.liverpooltours.com. We do it every summer. 40 years of bringing people to London and Liverpool and Henley. We go to George's home. My horror end of things, we got that book. In between that and the Beatle book, I sneaked out a book called True Ghost Stories of Connecticut. So I'll have that also at Chiller. And that really is a spin-off of, I'm doing a ton of paranormal events. I have a partner named Nick Grossman, and we're one half of a team called The Shaman and The Showman. Can you guess who The Showman is? and we go out and do paranormal events. and we produce the Paracon, which is a paranormal convention, which we do in Connecticut, May 13th and 14th at an old armory in Ansonia, Connecticut, the Ansonia Armory. And then we do one in November in Salem, Massachusetts. And that's the Salem Horror and Paranormal Convention at Salem State University. So I know a lot of your listeners love all the stuff. They're not just music people. They're just, they love all the same stuff we do. So if they love the horror and the paranormal, they can reach out to me and I'll get them information on all of that. But yeah, the Beatle tours, the conventions, the paranormal things, and also the Dracula tours. Every October we bring groups, and I'm proud. I'm proud that this is the 40th anniversary of my Beatles tour, but I have to also say it's the 25th anniversary of us bringing people to Transylvania. We do that every single fall, and we go to all the places. Romania, my gosh, the real deal. All the places connected to the legend of Dracula and the history of Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler. So if you've been on my Beatle tours and you had a great time, you want to try something different, go with us to Transylvania on a Dracula tour. It'll blow your mind.
I think 2024 could be my year for the Beatle tour. I think it's enough.
Wow.
Enough BSing by me. I gotta get my ass in gear.
We've been talking about that for a few years now, my friend.
Forever. Yeah.
You would VIP treatment across the board.
Oh boy, it's hard to resist now. Charles, it's always great to talk to you. I'm so excited about your book. And again, I've said it, but so many wonderful guests thanks to you, and I appreciate you very, very much, Charles, and thanks again for giving us time to be on this show.
Well, I appreciate that you gave me some leads, which turned out to be chapters in my book as well. So it's, one hand washing the other. What I'm looking forward to very much is when you announce this show and do one of your graphics for it, because when I see a Planet Ludwig graphic, even if I don't know the guest, I got to watch the show, because as great as your interviews are, so are your little, images for your shows. And I think that really makes it fun and adds to it. So kudos to you for the show, for putting it out there and, making it fun. I'm not talking to someone who's interviewing me. I'm talking to a friend.
Yeah, you too.
And, when we're together, it's the same conversations. I love you, man. I thank you for having me on your show.
Love you too, Charles. And until next time, best of luck with the book. And I'll see you at Chiller Theater, April 28th, 29th, and 30th.
Awesome.
Okay. Bye-bye, Charles.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Charles, man. You are the man. Charles Rosenaay, everybody, get that book. And let me take a couple of quick Beatle minutes to let you know what else we have here at planetludwig.com. Beatlesque stuff.
You'll see around the homepage. Just click here for all our Beatles stuff.
We have every Beatle album we've ever done. We have original Planet Ludwig Beatles videos. For instance, I took the Strawberry Fields Forever video, so I removed all the backgrounds and replaced it with some other psychedelic backgrounds. Sacrilegious? I know. Beatles Saturday morning cartoons. Every single episode, exclusive Beatles audio, original audio. For instance, Ringo's Finger from 1968 to 1976. Every single Apple Records single, both Beatles, group and solo, and non-Beatles singles that were released. A and B sides, Mary Hopkin, Badfinger, Jackie Lomax, they're all here. Every Beatles album completely covered by other artists. They're all here. Rubber Soul, Help, Sgt. Pepper, Hard Day's Night. I don't have to go through all of them. And then if you want to do other things besides Beatles, I'm telling you, we have so many lovely, wonderful pop culture stuff. Just check out the homepage here and look at all the cool stuff that we have here. Just click, click, click. Have fun. We love you here. It's all about pop culture. We love pop culture at planetludwig.com. More importantly, we love you guys for stopping by and giving some of your valuable time to us
just to relax, kick back, and rock on. We love you, everybody. See you next time.